So, welcome to a special edition of SheHUB Magazine's interview with Eugene Dean. As you know, Eugene is our cover story for our spring 2022 edition of SheHUB Magazine. And we thought we'd try something a little new and do this exclusive video footage only available in the app. So, hopefully, you will download the app in both the App Store and Google Play. But without further ado, welcome, Eugene. How are you today?
Yes, greetings, Carla. I'm good.
So,
Thanks
first
for
of
having
all, thank you
me.
for agreeing to be our cover man.
Yeah, this is all new territory for me. Trust me. So yeah,
Well,
it's
we
interesting.
couldn't have a green edition without featuring you. And who better to have on our cover than you? You are in Bermuda, the epitome of green, Mr. Sustainability, man of the earth. So I thought, you know what better pick than Eugene Dean? So, Eugene, for those who may not know you, let's start off by who are you?
Mm. Well, that's a very broad question. I'll keep it within the environmental realm primarily, but yeah, I'm the chairman of the board at Green Rock. I've been involved with Green Rock since 2007. The organization has evolved a lot over the years, and I'm happy to have been a part of that process. I've always been someone who's loved nature, who's really had a strong appreciation for nature. I do my best to spend as much time in nature as possible. So with that in mind, I've always had that type of consciousness to really encourage people to have more respect for Mother Earth and for all living creatures, because my understanding is that we're all connected and we're all one. So the more we respect other living beings, then the more we ultimately respect ourselves.
Now, you're a child of the 70s, like I, and we grew up with everything. We were the ones that had like the first microwaves and the first cell phones that weren't bricks, for example. We've had accessibility to so much. What in I look at you as someone who is unique. I know that you're not the only person in this sustainability environment, but what drew you to being this person? I remember you walking around with no shoes on, for example. What drew you to nature like this when there's so many modern day technologies and other things at your fingertips?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, actually. When I reflect on it, you know, you mentioned being born in the 70s and growing up in that time. Geez, Carla, that makes us sound like, it makes us sound aged. But yeah, so we, spent a lot of time outside playing around, had a lot of engagement with animals and things of that nature. Had my own personal experiences on farms and stuff like that, just because of how my family always had farms and always had their own animals and things of that nature. So I was connected to that. But when I really think about it, I think it was my search for a deeper level of consciousness, a deeper understanding and appreciation for life and how the world works. And I remember making a decision years ago, that I wasn't going to fight. Now, you know that may seem unrelated, but and I was very young at that age, and I remember making that decision that I didn't want to cause harm to anyone else, you know, and that grew into me, living like a plant-based diet, and I shifted to a plant-based diet, not for health reasons, so to speak, initially, but it's because I didn't want to kill anything, you know. So it was that level of consciousness, and also when I started to take on a more natural lifestyle, I immediately noticed the benefits to it, which then led to being barefoot and things of that nature, because there was a quest to just staying connected to Mother Nature, to Mother Earth, just the energy that flows through all of us and through the environment, and just recognizing the peace and tranquility that came along with like sitting in nature, being by the water, being in caves and things of that nature. Unfortunately, we were blessed to grow up in a beautiful environment like Bermuda with a subtropical climate. We don't have, jungles and monkeys and lions and tigers and stuff running around, but we definitely have enough environments that we can go to and hide out. And, the water is just a huge blessing and such a sanctuary for so many people. And so being in that environment, I was just keen on taking advantage of that as much as possible. And the more time I spent in nature, then the more of an appreciation I drew, I gained for nature. And that brought me into a state of consciousness where I just had this love and appreciation for life, period. So whether it was people, animals, trees, insects, I just had this appreciation. So I'm that guy who catches the cockroach and releases it outside, or catches the spider and takes it outside, or you know what I mean? I'm the one stopping my family. No, don't kill it.
And as I said, I'm the one that uses the bagel to chase the lizards and takes my shoe and squashes the roach and feels no way about it. But
So
that leads me to my next question. I mean, so many of us in our generation, in our peer group, may not be as committed to being environmentally friendly as you. Do you do you think that that is a fact that many of us aren't? And if so, how can we move towards that?
what the thing is that it is a way of life, and it starts from a consciousness and an understanding. The One of the challenges we face is that there are so many challenges in life, and all of us are afflicted in different ways, or find ourselves challenged in different ways. So what tends to happen is that, we tend to focus on what we deem to be priority, you know and so just being able to live, like Bermuda, as beautiful as it is a very expensive place. It's really is hard to be able to generate enough money or keep enough money to really like sustain yourself. So for a lot of people, that becomes a primary focus. And so decisions are made based on price. Let me just make sure I get the cheapest thing or the easiest thing or the quickest thing. And, it's very easy to build habits around that and get into that type of cycle. So for me, fortunately or unfortunately, based on my level of consciousness around the environment, in a lot of cases, I took like harder roads because I wasn't making decisions off of finances or what was easiest or what was most convenient. I was making decisions on what I felt was in the best interest of life, all of life, which includes, the environment and nature and animals and things of that nature, and other people. And so and then I've just got into a habit of it. So the way I live, the way I eat, and not throwing trash on the ground, like, like I've stopped a vehicle and made people get out of my vehicle and pick up trash that they thought that they were going to throw out of the window when they
Mhm.
were driving with me. I would be the one that hangs around after an event and I'm picking up all the trash off the ground and wondering why people are not as conscious. So I'm very thankful that I developed the type of connection that I have with nature. And I'm sure that should people decide to take more time in nature, to spend more time with themselves in nature, then they would start to develop a similar appreciation, and it could help to shift their mindset in a way, where they start to change behaviors. But it's a process that you have to engage. It's not something that you just say, oh, I'm going to be environmentally conscious now. It's a whole process. So even for me explaining it, it's hard to like pinpoint like just one thing that caused me to be this way. It's so many different things that have contributed to me living my life in the way that I do. And but ultimately, I've enjoyed or found a lot of success, and there's been a lot of benefits in my view to the way that I've lived, and that's just inspired me to continue to live and behave in this way.
So how can one start? I mean, it's never too late to start, right? But what are some simple things that one can do to start to, become more environmentally conscious?
Well, I would say like, just go and sit in nature. Just go to the park, just go to woodland areas, Spend time, look around, get your hands in the soil, start participating in things like farming, and see the earthworms and understand what's there. Go sit by the water, watch the birds and watch the fish and things of that nature. And then from that, then all of a sudden you could find yourself being more conscientious about, oh, well, I don't want to trash to go into the water.
Mhm.
I don't want like pollution in the air, because ultimately we depend on these things to survive. A lot of times people say we need to be more sustainable to save the earth. The reality is the earth will be fine. We're the ones who are going to be challenged with the
Mhm.
situation, because if we have polluted waters, polluted air, you know, then that's the atmosphere that we're left to live in. You know what I mean? So, in terms of taking simple steps, I would just say, like, become more connected with nature, with your environment. You know what I mean? And then out of that, you will naturally find that you develop like more respect, more consciousness, more awareness of what happens in those environments. It's the disconnect from nature, from the environment, that has led us to the position that we find ourselves in today. We spend all our time indoors. We're watching TV, video games, internet, computers, phones, and things of that nature. That's a disconnect. So taking time to put that down and to spend more time in nature, that in my view would be the start to develop some type of consciousness around, right, natural living and sustainability.
Now, there are organizations in Bermuda, such as Green Rock, that
Mhm.
people may not fully understand their function. What is the function of Green Rock in the community?
Well, yeah, as you see on the banner behind me, kind of like slogan is changing the mindset, and our focus is around sustainability and just working towards finding better ways for us to live and work more sustainably in Bermuda. So a lot of times with business, and we've seen this all around the world. I would just use like the oil spills that have happened as an example. Now, everyone can directly see what the benefit of oil has been to the whole industrial revolution and things of that nature, because we were able to generate electricity and power and all of these things and build factories and increase our capacity to produce and drive vehicles and all sorts of things. You know, the challenge becomes you have an oil spill and these companies that are making billions of dollars selling oil, right? Who's then responsible? Who's responsible for the damage that comes from the oil spills? When you take the bottled water industry, for example, so companies, that's a multi-billion dollar industry. But who's responsible for now all the plastic bottles that are left in the environment? You know, those companies that make all that money selling the water and the oil, they're not directly responsible for the environmental harm that they cause. So now when you have environmentally conscious initiatives or sustainable initiatives, is not just taking profit as the gauge for success, as the only gauge. It's environmental, economic, and social implications. So, environmentally friendly, or I guess sustainable companies have what they call a double or triple bottom line. You know what I mean? Where you have these factors, and that's what we're really looking for from Green Rock. Is not to say that we're not able to build enterprise. We're not trying to get in the way of the building enterprise, but whatever innovation we bring to the table, let's make sure that we're also considering the environmental implications in the development phase,
Hmm.
rather than what we have experienced over the past few decades. Whereas we develop these products and then down the road, we're like, oh man, wow, look at all the problems this caused. And then we're trying to fix problems on the back end. You know what I mean? We're looking to get people into a state of consciousness where we're actually considering these things in the front end so that they never happen in the first place. And we have the
So,
capacity to do that.
and in your opinion, do you feel that Green Rock is, I mean, I know Green Rock is a national, it's an international organization, but in Bermuda, is Green Rock making an impact in your opinion?
Well, we're having an impact. We can always do more. And obviously, we're constantly looking at ways that we can increase our capacity to do more. like any other organization, then we're in need of more human and financial resources to be able to achieve a lot of the things that we would like to achieve. We've set out some goals for the next few years, and we're just doing our best to work towards it. It's very pleasing to see the impacts that we do have. So I'm happy with the things that we have been able to achieve. But yeah, we do have a whole lot more work to do in terms of shifting the consciousness of the masses in Bermuda and around the world. Yeah.
What do you think, or do you think that more can be done by the government in being a sustainability leader? What are some things that could be implemented that will benefit the country as a whole?
Well, what I've learned through life is that our most potent tool for change is our example. So, you know, I'm not really an advocate for governments being required to do everything, because at the end of the day, it's up to us as people to make choices about what's going to be ultimately in our best interest. But with government being a facilitator, government can definitely put different programs or initiatives in place that encourage people to make better decisions, or even um, reward people for helping us as a country to achieve goals that are going to be in the interest of us all. And implementing programs. So for example, you know we learned this as parents, right? Is that you could say what you like, but at the end of the day, our children do what we do, you see. And so that's the same thing with leaders. So if our leaders are living sustainably, and this is a lot of times where the challenge comes in, there tends to be a disconnect between what we do sometimes in companies or even in governments and the way we actually live our lives. So we feel like, oh, well, let's do this great initiative. It's great for the country. Fine, it is great for the country, but how are you actually living? And what I found is that, if you live in accordance with the things that you're putting in place, then the impact becomes that more potent. So our government leaders can initially start by looking at themselves and figuring out how they can live more sustainably, and then bring that energy into their leadership, bring that consciousness into their decision making. There's a number of things that can be done, and there are things that are being done. Obviously, we all like to see things done a lot more quickly. We've been talking about a ban on certain single-use plastics for a number of years, and we're still waiting for that to materialize. Renewable energy is something that we're looking to transition to. It's been a very long process. The energy IRP was in 2018, is now 2022. Already it's been 4 years, and we haven't seen really sizable changes to say that we're on a set path towards achieving the goals that we set at that time. So obviously we like to see a lot more speed, but at the root of it, at the heart of it, it comes down to the way we live. So that's going to be the challenge. That's the challenge that I will put out to our leadership, to be more sustainable themselves, and set the example for the public at large.
So, one of the things I wanted to touch on was solar panels, for example, or electric cars, right? Where people may want to purchase them, but they cannot afford them. Do you think that we'll ever get to a time where being environmentally sustainable could also be affordable?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, ultimately, it is the cost of maintaining an electric vehicle is just fractions of the cost of maintaining an internal combustion engine vehicle. The challenge we have in Bermuda right now is that the price point on electric vehicles are extremely high. We're expecting that to change in time. Most of the major manufacturers are in the process of building electric vehicle manufacturing plants, or they've already built them. So electric vehicles will become the standard
Hmm.
in very short order. And you know how demand has an impact on price. So you will see the pricing going down. The challenge in Bermuda is that the main car dealerships on the island also make a sizable amount of their revenues from service. And the reality is that, you know, electric vehicles don't require anywhere near as much service as internal combustion engine vehicles. And so as a result, it appears that a lot of that cost has been added to the front end in an effort for those companies to maintain the revenue levels that they had before
Mm.
with these new vehicles. The other challenge is that it's been very difficult for the dealers to be able to find cars that fit within the size regulations on the companies of the country. So recently, we've heard comments from the Minister of Transport suggesting that they're open to relaxing some of the regulations to allow a wider variety of electric vehicles on the island. So those are some of the factors that are contributing. But what's the positive thing is that you have some independent dealers that have popped up, and their vehicles are a lot more economical because they're not coming from a model where they were carrying this huge service department. They're just coming in and selling cars. So there are options available for people now, and we anticipate that it would only continue to get better.
So, in a perfect world, in a perfect Bermuda, what would the perfect environmentally sustainable environment look like to you in Bermuda?
Well, first of all, we would generate our energy primarily, if not totally, from renewable energy sources. We would have electrified our fleet, and that's a difficult thing for people to come to terms with initially, because when we think about electricity, we think about the fossil fuels burning and the smoke coming out of the going up into the
Yeah.
environment. So yes, there will need to be a transition where we use more electric vehicles, um, while we're still burning fossil fuels. But over time, those fossil fuels should change to renewable energy sources. So now it's all renewable. You know what I mean? There's no pollution. Now, one of the major drivers, or the major driver of carbon emissions in Bermuda, is transportation. So that's really what, when you get zero emission vehicles, that's what you're really tackling. So the ideal situation would be that we're generating our energy from renewable energy. We've electrified our fleets, even ferries and things of that nature. We've been able to electrify. We have a lot more respect for natural environments. Our parks, our waterways, and things of that nature are far more accessible to residents and visitors. We have this whole ecotourism market that we're leveraging off, where people come to Bermuda to explore, to see our different nature reserves and see, even our marine reserves, and, our coral reefs are flourishing and things of that nature. So that's kind of like the balance. And, we're not, I guess, disposing of anywhere near as much waste as we are right now. We throw away per capita a lot more waste than most countries around the world in a very small place. So we've found a good balance in terms of like the products that we're bringing in, the things that we're able to recycle and things of that nature. So we have a more holistic balance. There's so many things that you can get into in terms of like, the food that we grow here, and growing more things locally and eating local and things of that nature. But there's a lot that goes into it. But the big things, I would say, are around the pollution. And if we can get beyond the pollution, and we can have more respect for our environment and have a clean environment, I think there's a lot for us to benefit from.
Well, thank you, Eugene, for doing this interview with us. And again, this is Eugene Dean. He is the chairman of Green Rock. And thanks for doing this interview with us. Again, visit the App Store in Apple as well as Google to download the recent edition of SheHUB magazine. And we look forward to seeing you again with our next cover story. Take care.